I will let you kick things off as usual. Let me try to get this music going. We'll see if we can get it working.
It always takes a second or two.
I think we're good.
This is known as the Radiological Incident in Leah, Georgia. This is a pretty well documented case, but it's a very interesting one. On a cold December day in 2001, 3 men took their truck and drove 50 kilometers east from their village in Leah in order to collect firewood. The village of Leah is located in the district of Salanjika, approximately 320 kilometers northwest of Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. Late in the afternoon, after the sun had gone down, the men discovered 2 curious objects. Lying in the forest path were 2 metallic cylinders. Around them, the snow had thawed up to a radius of approximately 1 meter. The wet soil was steaming. The objects were small, about 6 inches tall and 4 inches across, but they were extremely heavy. One of the men picked one up, but finding that it was hot, dropped it immediately. Encouraged by the unusual but welcome find, the men changed their plans. They decided that since it was getting dark, they would spend the night in the forest and return with firewood the next morning. They would use the hot cylinders, whatever they were, to keep themselves warm during the frigid night. One of the cylinders had holes in the frame. One man using a strong wire hooked it into the holes and carried the cylinder to an empty spot in the woods behind a large rock. There they lit a small fire to prepare dinner. The second cylinder did not have any holes, and the men lifted it with their bare hands and carried it to their makeshift camp for the night. The 3 men warmed themselves during the night using the small fire on one side and a hot cylinder behind their backs. After dinner, they drank some vodka and were settling down for sleep when they started to feel sick. They thought it may have been the alcohol, even though each had only had about 100 milliliters. None of the men could get a wink of sleep. About 3 to 4 hours after first contact with the mysterious cylinders, the men began to suffer from nausea, headaches, dizziness, and vomiting. The vomiting was very intensive and lasted throughout the whole night. Early in the next morning, exhausted from lack of sleep, they loaded only half of the gathered firewood into the truck and drove back to their homes. Late that night, one of the men had repeated intestinal distress. The next day, he went to the village doctor, but failed to mention his contact with the mysterious hot cylinders. The doctor suffered intoxication, and they also gave him a shot to treat a possible allergic reaction, and his symptoms dissipated. A week later, all 3 men began to develop redness, swelling, and painful blisters on their backs. After nearly 3 weeks of suffering, the men were admitted to a hospital in Zigdi, about 20 kilometers from Leah. They were diagnosed with acute radiation syndrome. The emergency medical center in Tbilisi was alerted, and the patients were transferred to the Institute of Hematology and Transfusion at the same city. The mystery cylinders the men had encountered in the forest were strontium-90 sources that were improperly embedded in the forest. The radioactive sources were used to power the radio relay systems between the hydroelectric station in Inguri and the Houdini hydroelectric station, which was under construction at the time. The block of strontium-90 was part of a radioisotope thermoelectric generator. It's also called an RTG, which is an electric generator that converts heat released by radioactive decay into electricity. They're used for low-power things such as satellites and space probes and things like that in remote locations. After construction of the second hydroelectric station ended, the radio system lost its function, and generators were left without supervision and control. By the end of the 90s, the generators were disassembled, and the radioactive sources were supposedly safely disposed, but apparently not all of them. Of the 8 sources originally installed, only 6 were cataloged. The 2 that were missing were the ones that were found by the 3 victims. One of the 3 victims' injury was minor. He was discharged after a month of treatment. One was taken to Paris for burn treatment, and he was released after nearly 1.5 years. The third was severely injured. He was taken to Moscow, where he required multiple skin grafts. After more than 2 agonizing years in a hospital, he died of multiple organ failure.
Don't go picking up everything you find in the woods, I guess.
So when I first heard this story, I was like, wow, that's crazy. I imagine there was a lot of mysterious, radioactive sources that went missing during the fall of the USSR and everything like that. But every day in the United States, a radioactive power source of similar potency goes missing.
Really?
Yeah. So just about anywhere, a little tiny cylinder could be there, be massively radioactive.
So when this happens, an angel loses its wings?
Yeah, I would say so. Oh, yeah. Every time they lose a radioactive source, an angel loses its wings.
What kind of area were they in, too? Like, in this expedition they were doing?
Getting firewood out in the forest.
The wrong forest, huh?
Yeah.
With no knowledge of what is taking place possibly in that area? Because it couldn't have been that far away from something, right? It said it was...
It was just outside, a little bit outside of town. They were within like a few kilometers of town.
It does make you wonder how they always dispose of that stuff,
Yeah, I mean, things go missing. Things get miscatalogued. You might have some people who don't know what they're disassembling. They don't know what they're doing, so they might not realize what they're throwing out is not just a piece of metal. It's something horrendous.
Yeah, it could be something completely horrendous. It's just, I guess you never really think about like the backside of that, because I know they had that like train derailment near Indiana, and they were disposing of that stuff, like, I don't know, an hour southwest of Indianapolis. So, I mean, yeah, it's got to go somewhere.
You never know what's going to happen at some points.
We don't know much about these guys, though. We just know what happened to them, so.
I do know that later on that the International Nuclear Agency ended up sending a crew to retrieve those sources, and they actually had to train the people that they can only be in contact with them for a total of 50 seconds each. So like they would use like a tool to grab it, move it so far to the truck, and then they would leave, run away, and someone else would grab it with another tool and drop it into the tank.
What year was this?
2001.
Jeez Louise, we're still that far behind in 2001? People are?
Yeah.
I say we, you know what I mean? We as human, I guess what I'm saying. You might as well just drink out of the thing, I think. That's crazy. So they get deathly ill.
Yeah.
You don't know why. But I mean, if you did get deathly ill, though, that wouldn't be like your first guess of what was wrong.
No, you probably wouldn't think that you would just encounter a radioactive, isotope.
You think they would say it was lupus or whatever what is it on the house? They always said it was lupus.
Yeah, lupus.
There's always lupus on house. Yeah. No, it wouldn't be. This is a pretty creepy one because I don't know if I go like messing with things in the woods necessarily like that. There's a lot of things you can find out there.
But you're talking like something the size of a coffee can.
Yeah.
So like you wouldn't think that would be something that would possibly kill 3 adult men just being around for a couple hours.
These guys are just puking up a storm.
Yeah.
And they failed to mention, but you wouldn't think like, hey, I messed with this thing in the woods and that's why I got deathly ill. You'd think like you ate something or maybe like a tick got you or a bug or something. You wouldn't think it was like something that crazy.
I say that, but at the same time, if there's like a mysterious coffee can shaped thing that is generating enough heat that all the snow is melted around it for 3-4 feet.
That's what people in the chat are saying right now. Actually, if something generating that much heat, I don't think I would be messing with it.
Yeah, because that does seem like there might be something up there.
So that length of time, it was still doing that, still that radioactive melting the damn snow.
Because it went missing in the 90s.
Jeez, so it's 2000. Yeah, wow. That's crazy. I'm going to blame the Cold War. That's a pretty neat story. That's a good setup for the rest.
Yeah.
Is that easing us into the rest or?
Yeah, because the next 2 are much more famous incidents, but they all both have 2 really neat stories of people who survived them. And I think they're scary in the sense that this is something that happened as a nightmare that they went through it.
I'm excited to hear them then.
Yeah.
Jeff Townsend Media. CG, good night.
And the question is, do I stay here? Will you be back? Are you gonna come back? Will you be back? Are you coming back?